Well, Dylan, should we get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Um, well, I guess just to start, I'm Christine. I'm the coordinator at the Women's Center. Um, I'm really excited about today's Feminist Friday with Dylan. Thanks everybody for joining us via Zoom. This is our first Feminist Friday online. As far as I know, I see Young's on the call too. And she was the director of the center for 7 years. But I don't recall of Feminist Friday being online, Young, during your time. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This is The Story Starts With You, a digital storytelling workshop with Dylan Barrett. And Dylan is a communication and journalism major. I think everyone here actually knows Dylan, but I'll give just a little intro anyway. He was our 2019-2020 undergraduate grant recipient at the Women's Center. And he used these funds to enhance and practice techniques for digital communication. And with that, he traveled to the Gambia and Senegal over this last J term, and he gathered footage around the organization From Mother to You, a nonprofit created by St. Thomas alum Fatoumata Jaite that focuses on maternal health. So we're very excited to learn from Dylan today. And Dylan, I'll just hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Christine. To echo, I really, really appreciate you all being here. And I hope that I can provide some real tips, real strategies for you all to start storytelling more confidently. So without further ado, here we go. My two goals for this session are to provide real tips on how to start capturing better photos and videos today, and to also empower you to start storytelling more confidently. And a quote that I came across in my research and mentorship from someone named Dr. Julie Jones, she says, "Don't just take people there. Show them things they wouldn't notice even if they were." And I think that sums up a lot of what I try to embody in my storytelling. And I think it's a unique frame of looking at your own photos, videos, however you choose to tell stories. So why this session? Storytelling is important. And as humans, we're naturally storytelling creatures. And there's something special that happens when you connect with a good story. A quote that I found from Brandon Stanton, the photographer from Humans of New York. He said, "There's a comfort, an affirmation, and a validation in being exposed to people with similar experiences and problems." And that's so true, right? Whenever you see something that you can connect with, that's really, really powerful. And so now more than ever, when we're all at home digitally, it's important to have these connections and validations, even if we're not there in person. So whether you're a teacher, creative professional, student, or even parent that just wants to document their children's early years, you can do it. You can start telling better stories. So the question I get asked a lot is, what's the best way to tell a good story? Is it through text? Is it through video? Is it through photography? The truth is, it's all of them. And now is a better time than any to start practicing and working on these skills in a way that is applicable to you. I think a lot of us, I know I do, fall into thinking sometimes that feeling guilty if we're not being overly productive or coming up with new content all the time. But it's okay to just sit back and learn and work on these skills. So I think we're all better when we make those connections, whether that's digitally or in person, and storytelling is a way to make those connections. So one last thing before we jump in. I think storytelling is a privilege. It is an immense power to bring out voices that don't often get heard, and other stories, however big or small, that we tell are not our own. So with this responsibility, great power comes great responsibility. It's important to be mindful of communities and people impacted by our stories. And the way we craft narratives, and is it culturally aware and sensitive? This sentiment I got most from one of my mentors named Lisa Berglund, who is a amazing digital storyteller. She's worked for all of these brands and logos that you see down there. And she is also the first female and only female photographer of the year from the National Press Photographers Association. And so she's worked all over, and she really conveys the importance of these things that I just said. Being mindful of the narrative. Are you being culturally aware and sensitive? And would the people in your stories be happy with their portrayal? Lisa conveyed this by saying one of her favorite quotes is, before you speak, pass your words through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? And I think when you apply those 3 things to your photos, your videos, and your digital storytelling, it'll become all that better. So, how do I start? Is the question. It can be really, really daunting when you don't know, when you see all these great things online, whether that's on social media or YouTube, and they seem really, really professional, but you just want to know how to get started. And the one thing that I found that helps really, really well is to shift the mindset from creating to documenting. So once you think about that you are the driving element in your stories, it can make it the barrier to entry way easier. So instead of thinking that you have to spend all this time coming up with a new idea, coming up with this perfect shot, this perfect photo, if you just document the world around you, document your experiences, that will create some really powerful stories. And this can start right where you are right now. There's a photographer that I follow on Instagram, and a few years ago, he came up with this idea called the December Portrait Series. So for every day in December, or every other day, however he chose to do it, he just took a photo of one of his friends and posted it with a caption about why he was grateful for them, what's the impact that they made on his life, and how they make the world around him better. And that is a really, really strong way to do it. And that's just taking the people around you and kind of sharing with others why they make your life so great. So family, friends, are you quarantining with anyone right now? How are they helping make your time bearable? All of those things. And some other guiding questions that can help you get started. Is there a shared experience? We're all living in one big shared experience right now, which is quarantine, COVID-19. And so if you tap into that, however big or small, a shared experience, that's another way to create a really powerful narrative, really powerful story. Is there a surprise? Were you surprised when your child said this? Were you surprised by that person in your Zoom class that had a really profound statement or wasn't paying attention during class? All these things are surprising and real experiences. And another one that I like to tell people is, what are you obsessed with right now, that you can share about, that you can tell the story of? For me, I'm becoming more and more obsessed with coffee. I have been researching like the glass, which maker is the best, how do you grind your coffee. Sharing with people what you're obsessed with right now is an easy way to share your passions, or at least what you're passionate about right now. And all of those things can help focus. I want to share this podcast that I came across in my research on different genres and mediums of storytelling. It's called Speak Up Storytelling. And the founder is a husband and wife that teach how to tell stories live in front of an audience. And so it's a really interesting medium that you don't often see. It's not like a comedian that stands in front of an audience and tells jokes, but it's telling real stories that happened to them. And the founder came up with this unique strategy called homework for life. And so going along with this document, don't create strategy, if you're struggling to come up with ideas for stories, I urge you to do this. Create an Excel document that has 2 columns. One column is the date, and the other column is the most story-worthy thing that happened to you that day. And so, to be honest, I don't do this every day, but I do it when I remember and when I can. And it's kind of life-changing. It creates a moment for you that you can always go back to, a document that you can always go back to, and a few lines, a few words will automatically spark your memory. Stories are all around us. They're floating. Moments are passing every second of every day. And sometimes it feels overwhelming to not be able to capture all of them in one place. And so that's a strategy that you can use not to tell great stories, but also to have some great memories and capture life. And so I hope that is at least one way that you can get going. So the rest of the workshop is kind of divided into 2 big areas. So some big picture guiding principles that I've come across that I think are really important to keep in mind. And then some tangible tips. Like I said, I want to give you some real ways that you can start going out and practicing in your backyard, in your apartment, in your house, and taking good photos. So starting with the big picture, use whatever technology you have. I know it seems, for sure me, when I was getting started in videography and digital storytelling, it always seemed like the best things I saw was because someone had a $20,000 cinema camera or a really, really nice DSLR. But the truth is, the best camera is not a Sony, it's not a Canon, it's not a Panasonic. The best camera is the one that you have with you and the one that you learn. So for most of us, this means a cell phone. It's remarkable that we all have a camera in our pockets at all times. And even on my trip to Senegal and the Gambia with Fatimata, some of the best moments I captured were not with my gear that I brought, but it was with one of our phones. And it's just being able to notice when a really cool moment is about to happen and thinking if you can get your gear, but if you can't, your phone will always work, and using that. And so the best camera is the one that you learn. What do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people use their phone cameras, but there's a whole host of settings and things in the menu that once you start digging through, there are some ways you can really, really make your camera work to the best of its ability. So I want to show you an example of something from our trip that I shot completely on my iPhone, and I edited it on my computer so I could caption it and give it titles. But the principles are there, and so let me show this to you and we can talk about it. So this is Muhammad's Pharmacy.
My name is Mohammed Fati. I'm a nurse and RN. I study in the US. I worked in the US for like 14 years before coming back to the Gambia. If you check around this area, there is no pharmacy and there is no clinic. So this is gonna be an ideal place for the neighborhood. My hope is to expand it for the community.
He has built this pharmacy out of his own pocket.
All by myself. I bought the land by myself, built it by myself.
It has a bathroom, it has a space for the lab, it has a waiting room. The only thing left is to fill it with people. For one person to do this, it's not easy at all.
So that is Muhammad's Pharmacy. So it's not the most life-changing story. It's not, um, the best you've ever seen in your life, but it's really amazing what you can do with just your phone. And so even, I think we visited Muhammad for less than half hour. We hung out with him and he showed us around and all this work he was doing just by himself. And that day was more of a visiting day than a filmmaking day. And so I didn't have my gear with me, but I still wanted to share the story of this person that built this whole building and is providing this service to his community all by himself. And so I really think that all of you can do the same thing. You can share the stories of people that are doing good work, of interesting things and people that you find in your own lives that you experience every day. So that was Muhammad's Pharmacy. We can talk more about it at the end if you have any questions. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the chat. And Christine is kind of moderating. So if we have any questions, be sure to throw them out. But that was Muhammad's Pharmacy, shot on iPhone. So my next big picture tip is to find your focus, and not only physically making sure your pictures aren't blurry, but what is your focus in the story that you're telling? There's an old Ansel Adams quote that says, "There's nothing worse than a sharp image of a fuzzy concept." And this is one of my pet peeves whenever I'm on social media or YouTube, and you see this really, really beautiful video or photo, and it looks good because it's been edited really, really well, but it's not really telling or communicating anything. So finding your focus when you're telling a story, when you're writing a post, when you're speaking to a webcam in a class and trying to make a point, finding your focus is really, really important. And so one of the ways you can do that is with a commitment statement. So if you know for your work or your job or school, you have this project that you're working on, I urge you to come up with a commitment statement before you start taking photos, before you start shooting video. And all a commitment statement is who feels what. So for Muhammad's video, my commitment statement was, Muhammad is proud of his pharmacy. And if you go into your project, go into your filming or photography with all of your energy directed at that commitment statement, it'll be all the better. And you won't have to make story choices after the fact because everything you've worked for is toward that commitment statement. So that is finding your focus. And then beyond just simply taking photos and videos, it's important to be a human first. So inject your heart into everything you do, listen, collaborate, and know when to put the camera down. I think one of the most important things that I learned from my trip was these things, not putting into practice all of the technical skills that I learned in my research, but these things. I think it wasn't until day 5 or 6 that I actually took my camera out. And it was a 35-day trip. So taking the time to build relationships and to hear the needs of people instead of just going in with a camera, taking photos of everything, those relationships matter and will make your stories all the better. Like I said before, asking yourself if the people in your stories would be happy with the way they're portrayed is one of the things that I try and ask myself a lot, and often makes it less about me and more about the person, the subject, the story. And removing yourself, unless it's about you, of course, but taking that time to focus on the person will make it all the better. And like I said, knowing when to put the camera down. So we spent a lot of time in hospitals and maternal health clinics, and there was oftentimes, patients and a lot of good health work going on that we didn't have permissions for or didn't need to show. And so, like I said, being a person first and approaching all situations as a human first is so important. So now my favorite part, the tangible tips, the things that you can start doing right now to make your photos, your videos better. The first is with these 3 basic types of shots, courtesy of my friend Busy, who let me take some pictures of her sunbathing a few days ago. So wide shots, medium shots, tight shots. You won't be able to unsee this, but when you're scrolling on your social media next, almost all shots are medium shots, and it's taken at eye level. So what this allows you to do is move around and get a different variety of photos and images that not many people are doing. Wide shots do a great job of helping establish location and context. And so they're great at showing the entire environment and kind of what's going on. So for Fatimata and I, what that meant was when we were at a hospital, getting the whole environment, getting the whole hallway, getting all the doctors and nurses doing their thing provides context. Medium shots, while they're the most prevalent, I think, they're also the most natural. The way we interact with other human beings are at a sort of medium shot. We see each other, we don't get too close, we don't get too far away, but we're engaging at that sort of medium shot level. And so they replicate that normal field of view. Finally, my favorite type of shot is a tight shot. So it's getting really close and providing detail and emotion and texture for whatever you're trying to capture. So some more examples, a wide shot. We can see the whole environment. We're on top of a kind of a hill walking down, and we can see the tree, we can see the city, houses and people in the sky, and we're getting that whole environment. Medium shot, we went to a monkey park on one of our days, and I captured this on my phone. He was looking at me, I had to get him. Filling the frame, but not being too far away or too close. And then close-ups. This is one of my favorite photos that I took on my phone in our trip. And there was a goat friend that was nearby, and I just got my camera really, really close, and you can see the detail in the whiskers, and it provides a really kind of fun and interesting image. So wide, medium, tight. That is one thing that you can start doing right now, and you can practice doing the same thing. So finding a person in your house or a thing that you really, really like, and practicing wide, a medium shot, and then a really, really tight shot. And what those different shots tell you about, what they convey differently than just sort of the same medium shot. The next, the world is your tripod. What do I mean by that? So I am a huge proponent of not buying a bunch of gear, using what you have. And gear is expensive, tripods are expensive. I don't have a tripod for my phone, some people do, but using the world around you, using your knee to prop it on, using a bookshelf or a tree to steady your image is a way that you can make your images not come out blurry. I know that's a very common thing where you take a photo and you're like, oh, it's blurry, I have to retake it. Well, keeping steady, keeping stable is one way you can fix that. And keeping in mind, you can use things using a table, using your, like I said, your knee. All of these will help steady your shot and fix that blurriness that sometimes comes with images. Another tip is to zoom with your feet. So instead of zooming digitally, kind of pinching in, that introduces a bunch of graininess and called noise into your image. And it's not actually the camera zooming, it's the image just being stretched out, so it's really, really small. So one way to get around that is to, like I said, zoom with your feet. Instead of standing across the room and zooming in, walk across the room and get really, really close. The closer you can get your camera to the thing, the better. And then composition. So this is a photo credits go to my friend Kevin, who's here today. Great photo that I'll talk about in a sec. But composition is, I think, the easiest way to make your content look better. help your stories come across more clear. And again, it costs no money. You don't need any other gear. It just takes some time and thinking about how you want to compose your shot to make it look better. So the first tool of composition I want to give you is called the rule of thirds. It's built in on most phones and it's accessible on all cameras. So sometimes, again, you'll need to go into a menu on your phone, into the camera settings, and click Enable Rule of Thirds, or find it in a small icon. But what this is it divides your shot into sort of 9 panels. And the panels aren't what's the important part. It's the lines and the intersections. So the intersections are the points of most focus and feels the most natural when you're taking a photo. So if you can place a subject along a line or at one of those points of focus, that will automatically make it look more professional and more intentional on your part. So in Kevin's photo, you can see the subject in this case is the person holding the umbrella, and it's falling right on that third, both on the lower line and the leftmost line, so falling on that intersection point. And our eyes are naturally drawn to that. So that works really well. Also, you'll notice the horizon is just above that third as well. So you can place horizons at the third, you can place the sky above a building at a third. All of those are ways you can do that. Another composition tool is framing. So if you shoot a photo, take a photo through an object, this forces perspective that makes for some interesting images. This could also mean using a wall or a door to bring focus. I'll go back in Kevin's photo, getting a little bit of framing by this wall or pillar here on the side. It's taking up space that's forcing us to look at what we want people to look at. And so an example from my trip, I took on my iPhone, and one of the places Fatimata and I stayed with her family had like one of those metal bolt locks. And so this is the hole that the bolt lock goes through, and so I just took my camera and stuck that right in the bolt hole and took a photo. And I think it came out pretty well. It draws a lot of focus to the street and the other compounds in an interesting way. So using framing is another composition tool. Leading lines is another tool that you can use to direct people to your subject. Here is a photo of my partner Emma on a bridge, and in this case, the edges of the bridge are being used to direct your eye towards the subject, her. And so this, again, could be walls, it can be hallways, it can be railroad tracks, alleyways. There's a lot of natural lines in design in the natural world. And so use them. Try and keep an eye out for them and use them in your photos and videos. And last, cropping. So I'm sure you've all heard of cropping, but it allows you to introduce framing and make compositional decisions after you've already taken the photo. So if you've taken the photo and it didn't quite turn out how you wanted, that's okay. You can crop it and make your subject fall on one of those third lines, or be more intentional about where they are in the frame. And so that's why cropping can be really, really, really powerful. So this is another example that I wanted to show from my friend Busy, who is also here. Applause for Busy, great photo. This was taken on an iPhone 7. And so again, just goes to show, it doesn't matter the technology you have, you can do it. So there's a number of things working really, really well in this photo. First of all, she told me that this was an accident, that this person in the middle was in her way. She was trying to get this cool sun effect, but it was a happy accident. So whenever you're taking photos and videos, I urge you to lean into those mistakes, those accidents of things not going quite how you want them to go, because sometimes they turn out all the better. And if you'll notice, the person with the suitcase is on a third, the skyline is on a third, and we've got leading lines directing you directly to the subject. So once you start thinking about these things, you notice them everywhere. And like I said, when you watch movies, when you're scrolling on Facebook, Instagram, you'll start to see these things. Almost every shot in a movie uses the rule of thirds or the golden mean, and it's really, really cool to notice these things once you get going. So I also wanted to share some of my favorite mobile editing tools for photography. All of these will let you play with color, but more importantly, earlier, they're tools to help you crop. And Lightroom also has a built-in camera that allows you to play with a bunch of different features and make kind of step up your photography game from just your phone to using your phone in a manual way and adjust what you want to adjust. But Polar, Lightroom, and Visco are all tools that you can sort of step up your photography game and make images look like kind of what every image that you've seen that was mine, I edited on one of these three, and it's a fun way to play and learn about what color does and how to compose your shots just like that. So finally, I want to remind you that storytelling starts with you. You are all interesting, unique people, and you all lead unique, beautiful lives that are worth sharing. And so I urge you to document, not create, to inject your heart, and to always, always practice. Practice every day with taking photos, writing stories, interviewing the people closest around you. And the more you practice this, the better you'll get at it, and the more effective you'll be at storytelling. So I want to thank you all so, so much, and a huge thank you to the Women's Center for providing this opportunity, and to you all for joining me for a little bit on this first Feminist Friday with the Women's Center. And so I know we still have some time, and so I wanted to open it up to reactions and questions, and just sort of hear what everyone's thinking and has to say. I'll also say really, really quick, feel free to reach out to me if this was kind of a very broad, and I wanted to keep it as accessible to people as possible. So I'm happy if you send me a note to go deeper with any of these subjects or any other subject you're interested in learning or talking about. So thank you very much.
Dylan, may I ask a question?
Always.
Oh, fabulous. How do you go about getting informed consent and having those discussions with some of your subjects that might be where you're capturing vulnerable moments?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really important, and often the law doesn't match with what you probably should do. So, for example, Minnesota is what they call a one-party state. So you are allowed to record and take photos of anyone that you want without their permission. And I know, right? It doesn't make much sense. Only one party has to be aware that there's a recording going on. But in my opinion, that's not like the right way to do it. And so, oh, Fatimata's here. Hi, Fatimata. I didn't even see. I was full screen the whole time. I think it's really important to always ask. And so if you're filming a quick video or snapping a photo, just going up to a person and asking and saying, hey, are you okay with me filming this moment or being on camera or for this reason? And even though you don't always have to, and it might be uncomfortable to do so, it will make your life so much easier in the long run. Does that answer your question? Fantastic.
I want to put your on.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I'm also here with Emma, so sorry I just popped in. I was just curious because I know this could definitely be something that's an area of like study for people or who have a lot of mentors in this type of learning. How would you suggest somebody who doesn't have that formal training or they're not going to school for that continue to learn? Like, what are some resources that you find are really helpful for people?
Absolutely. So kind of separate, but not separate. That was a lot of information that I just threw at you. And I have a kind of a one-page document that's like a summary for all of this that I'll have Christine send out later as just a reference. But I think some of the best places you can go are online. So YouTube, there's a number of really good creators that share good content. But my favorite resource, and the resource that's access to everyone at St. Thomas, is LinkedIn Learning, believe it or not. So I don't know why they don't tell us this more, but if you have a St. Thomas email, you can access LinkedIn Learning for free. And it used to be called lynda.com, if you've ever heard of that. But there are literally millions of hours of really professional training at all the levels, wherever you're at, and including beginner courses on photography, videography, and not just that. There's a whole host of business and marketing and logo design and a bunch of software. But I think that's a good quality resource that I found.
Hi, Dylan.
Hi, Vern.
Young, I saw you raised your hand too. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, no, you go ahead.
Well, I want to start by saying excellent job and thank you for sharing. And I know we've had some brief conversations about this, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit about how the learning that you've done in this particular area has shaped how you view your vocation, your career trajectory, and those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I think the biggest insight that I've came through all of this was that slide that I shared when I was talking with my mentor, Lisa Bergeland, and the impact that your presence has. And, you know, there's a whole host of research of this culturally with race and gender and all of those things. But your presence really, really impacts communities, no matter how careful or thoughtful you are. And for Fatimata and I, you know, I was a white man in an African country promoting women's health work, and that required me to first set down the camera and build those relationships before going in and shooting a bunch of video. And so vocationally for me, it really means like being thoughtful and careful about the narratives that I'm crafting and the stories that I want to choose to tell and use my skills for. And for a job, that means being thoughtful about who I want to work with and which stories I want to help tell. So does that sort of answer the question?
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Vern. Dr. Ann?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your knowledge. And I'm so heartened to see so many of you, through this technique, while we are confined to our own space, this technology allows us to get to see those of you who have left the college, and Fatmata, I don't know where you are, but maybe you are in the different continent or here. It's a great opportunity to affirm what LDCW was able to do, and such. So I learned a great deal, and I was particularly struck by your kind of emphasis on emotion and feelings. While you are spreading information and using your communication skills and expertise, you also highlighted the importance of capturing the subject's emotion and the affect. I couldn't help but notice the similarity between, say, kind of literary, writing and storytelling that Women's Center has been, working on and presenting, and your visual storytelling is when you said who feels what, where does the kind of information comes in, where does the information aspect come in, and which kind of subject are you focusing on, so those are the kind of behind the storytelling decision making process, I'm sure. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you can focus emotion while kind of conveying knowledge, thoughts, and broaden information?
Yeah, and I guess to get after what you're asking like if you're doing a story or taking a photo of someone, like an individual, like how do you make those decisions of what they're feeling?
Right,
because you don't decide for them, right?
Right, and then your lens also kind of tells a lot of information, right, and conveys lots of information, and so you might want to convey to the viewer, okay, this pharmacist is opening this corner, and these are the spaces that he's working on, what needs to be stocked, to for whom. So all these kind of facets of information may need to be told while you are focusing on the subject's emotion, right?
Yeah.
So how do you pack those in without losing, as you say, the focus?
For sure. I think the biggest thing, like I said, is to listen. So I didn't make that commitment statement before we met him or before we started filming. It kind of came to me as we were going, and taking the time to not only listen to what they're saying, but what their goals are, their aspirations are. For example, like he was very, very proud of that he did this all by himself, and so that I wanted to convey through what I had, and having that one driving focus allows all the other things to sort of come naturally underneath it. So if you have too many focuses, you can split attention here and here. But I think when you really listen to where people are at, what people are saying, and choose one thing, and it's really hard because often, like in my jobs at the university or in my own social media posts, it's hard to do that. You have all this space and all this you know, if you think of it like a canvas, you don't have very many edges of your frame. You can kind of do whatever you want. And so that makes it really, really hard to choose what you want to convey. But listening and respecting the subject as much as you can will allow those things to follow, I think.
All right, great. Thank you.
Dylan, we've got one question from the
Yeah.
chat box. I'll just read it. What, if any, elements have you used from your degrees in Kojo and English and applied to video/photo work?
Yeah, so Kojo is an interesting major because you can take a lot of classes in different genres. And so I think, like I've taken journalism classes, and those have helped me in learning the importance of a focus of a story. A lot of times in like a news story, a news piece, you only have 30 seconds to a minute to get a point across. And so that really makes you, again, like I was talking with Dr. Ann, you have to choose something and focus in on. And so I think having that journalism background has allowed me to see what I like and what I don't like about that field, and apply only the best of each of the genres that I've learned from to what I want to do. And so I've also taken classes in filmmaking, which really get into a lot more of those technical elements of composition and color and light and all of those things. And I could speak for 2-3 hours on just framing, on just close-up shots, but it's really, when you boil it down, it's the basics that I talk about that make up any good photo and video.
May I ask another question too?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Kind of going off of my initial question and Dr. An's question, Lindsay Adario, when she came, she talked about how, one, like getting the informed consent and figuring out how they want to capture it, but she expressed it was difficult after having captured the moment to like talk with those people about what she captured. Mm-hmm. Have you had any conversations similar to that with some of the people you've captured?
Yeah, about maybe taking a photo that was really, really good that you're like, man, I probably should have asked about that.
More like you had the discussion prior, but then going back and like double checking, we talked about this, I captured this moment, is this how you wanted me to capture it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example. Again, that happens more with sort of the journalistic background of kind of going into something and capturing all you can get to make a story afterwards. But I would say that, yeah, I'm drawing a blank on a specific example, but you're absolutely right. It's important to treat each story as a case-by-case basis, and checking in with people always. So like with Muhammad's story, Fatimata, I would probably have you send that to him before we would post it, and just see if he was okay with that. And if he's not, we would go back and alter it. But in each case, like I said, if that is how you're approaching it, if you are making sure that people are comfortable with how they're being portrayed, that's usually the best. But also, I'm reminded of that quote again from Lisa Berglund: "Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?" Sometimes it might not be kind, but it might be true or necessary. So if you are telling a story that you know needs to be told, it might not be kind, but it has to be done. And again, my brain is jumping to like news stories about big companies that are abusing their power or doing their things. It's not kind to that company, but that's okay, because that's the story. That's what people need to hear about that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Dylan, I have a question for you.
For sure.
So in terms of platforms and
Mhm.
places for people to be telling these stories, I know social media is the one that comes to mind right away. But do you know of other sources for stories to be told like this? Maybe for people who aren't necessarily that into social media, like
Mhm.
other venues that people can tell their stories.
Yeah. So this was very text or very photo video heavy, but the truth is you can convey stories in whatever medium you're most comfortable with. If you're an artist, if you're a really great writer or poet, having having a blog is a great way to sort of express your thoughts, especially if you're text based, and having that home that's still accessible for people, but it's not trying to compete with other things on social media. I'm trying to think of other. Yeah, that's the one that comes to mind as like a for text based things. But yeah, it's a hard question because it really is hard to get away from social media, isn't it? Like that's where all the attention is. Um, and if you choose to use social media as your venue, as your medium, um, implementing these tips will make your stuff stand out from someone who's kind of just posting without as much thought going into it.
Thanks.
Dylan, I like what you said about document, don't create.
Mm-hmm.
But even with some of the tips for strengthening what you've documented, like cropping and trying to find those things, I find especially with the apps that you suggested, like Polar, there's still so many choices that can be made. So I guess like how do you limit yourself to not create so much and just simply present what was taken? Or are there, ways in which you've sort of created something out of something that you also document? I think you shared like maybe like those live photos are helpful for maybe reposing something.
Yeah, yep. And I have a few more tips that I'll include on that like one page sheet. But another super cool practical tip is that most photos or most phones have the option to take photos as live, or I think on Samsung they're called motion photos. I always try and do those because if I take a photo and miss the moment that I was looking for, that I was trying to get, it captures before and after the moment. So you can go back after you've already taken the photo and scroll through and find the exact moment that you wanted and have that one be. So the example is that photo of the monkey that I shared, where it looks like he was looking right into the camera. He was actually kind of looking around and eating, but I scrolled through and I selected that one photo where it looks like he was right into the camera, and that made for all for a better photo. So that's another little nugget that you can try. But as far as all the options that you have, I think the kind of cop out answer is you just have to choose one. Is like you can edit a photo for hours and hours and hours and bring out these certain colors and do these certain colors, but at some point you just have to share it. And so if you find yourself running into a roadblock, like with Muhammad's story, there's so many ways I could have put a cutaway here or a close-up of a paint can here or doing all those things, but I was like, I got to show it to everyone at this workshop. So sometimes done is better than perfect. And that's definitely a principle that I've found when working with all of these technologies and softwares and things. And sometimes it's easier to just do what you know how to do within that app. If there's all these color choices and all you know how to do is cropping, just stick to the cropping. If all you know how to do is to change the white balance, to change like whether it's warm or cold feeling in your image, just do that. Yeah. be honest with your own skill level and kind of where you're at.
Thanks so much.
I think we've got time for one more question.
I have a question. So if you're like struggling to find kind of the angle of the story, like what advice do you have to try to find a focus to kind of lean into and focus on?
I think kind of the underlying principle of a lot of the things I've talked about is having empathy. You know, I haven't said it outright, but having empathy really will allow you to inject your heart and do all of those things that I talked about. And for me, what that often looks like is putting myself in an audience's shoes. So when someone is looking at this photo or watching this video that I put together, it's like, what do I want them to feel? Or what should they feel based on what I know about this story, about the subject? And so that, of course, implies that you know who your audience is, and sometimes that's a whole nother challenge. But usually you'll know who your audience is, and when you can put yourself in their shoes, you know how you want them to feel when you're sharing this work with them. And so you can kind of reverse engineer that into creating the story itself, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dylan. I know I learned a lot from this. Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending too. It's great to see everybody. Yeah, Dylan, I don't know if you have any closing statements, but we really appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. And again, I'll say the story starts with you. Go out, capture life around you, and start sharing. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan.
Peace.
Thanks, Dylan.